Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars, and I'm here today to bring you another of my Star Trek film reviews, and today's film review is for Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Now this was released in 1984, and it was a direct sequel essentially to Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. And the film was directed by Leonard Nimoy, and all the original cast return, as well as new faces like Robin Curtis plays Savick, as Kirstie Alley did not return from Star Trek 2. Her role was recast apparently because she was demanding a little bit too much money for a return in Star Trek 3. And Christopher Lloyd, who plays like the leader of the Klingons in The Bird of Prey. Now this film focuses on, it follows directly on from Star Trek 2. Essentially Kirk is still struggling with the death of Spock. They are returning to space dock with the Enterprise after its battle damage, and they decide to retire the Enterprise. Basically, they're done with it. It's 20 years old, they're not going to do anything else with the Enterprise. So Kirk is visited by Spock's father, who wants an explanation as to why he left Spock on the Genesis planet. And he learns that Spock's Katra should have been passed to somebody else, and through a little bit of investigating they discovered that it was actually given to McCoy, which you saw in Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, at the end of that, when he mind melted with McCoy. So Kirk then decides he's got to do everything in his power to try and get Spock's soul, his body and his soul, back to Vulcan. However, the Federation are not going to allow him a starship, so he decides he's going to steal the Enterprise to make his way there, which he does. He gets a skeleton crew, heads to the Genesis planet. However, there is Christopher Lloyd's Krug, a Klingon commander on a bird of prey that wants the secrets of Genesis so that he can reignite the power of the Klingon race, and he will do anything to achieve getting this power. That's the basic premise of the story here. Now, I remember actually quite clearly going to the cinema to see this with my father, as I did with all the Star Trek films right up until he died in the early 90s. We went to see them all together. And I think Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4 are essentially a trilogy. After that they're all a bit bitty and batty. They don't follow on directly from each other, but 2, 3 and 4 are essentially a trilogy of films. And this is the weakest of them, I think it's fair to say. However, that's not to say that this is a bad film, because I don't think it is. I mean, look at the competition. It's got Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 4 bookending it. Not an easy position to be in. Now, there are some real classic Star Trek moments in this film. Some absolutely brilliant classic Star Trek moments in this film. The scenes with McCoy, when he's going a bit loopy with Spock's Katra in his head and he's at the bar trying to negotiate a ship to get back to the Genesis planet, and some of these lines are just brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And when he finds out that what Spock's done to him, when he says it's his revenge on me for all those arguments he lost. I mean, there's classic line after line after line in this Star Trek. And I remember my dad, he had a really booming laugh, and I remember every time he watched this, well, Star Trek 2, 3 and 4 especially, because there was some really, certainly in 3 and 4, some lighter moments, and he had this booming laugh, and I just remember my dad's laugh very clearly on some of the scenes in this film. Now, I think Christopher Lloyd plays a brilliant Klingon in this film. Really does a great job. He's a great actor, Christopher Lloyd, and he does, I think, a really good job as playing this Klingon commander who, and again, spoiler, I'm not worried about spoilers in films like this with this kind of age, and I'm guessing if you're watching this you probably have seen this film and are a fan of Star Trek, so I'm not worried about spoilers. The fact that he has Kirk's son David killed so cold-bloodedly, well, he doesn't, he tells him to kill one of them and he doesn't care which. And it's going to be Savick, and then David saves her and he gets killed. And that scene from Kirk is, I mean, I know everybody goes on about William Shatner and his Kirk acting and stuff like that. And yes, it is over dramatic sometimes, but I think the scene when he finds out his son's just died is a really impactful scene. Kirk's response to that. So I think there's some high points in this film. Yes, there are some low points in the sense of the plot is quite bonkers, because the big plot hole in this film for me is Spock's father tells Kirk, you've got to bring Spock's soul, essentially his catter that's in McCoy's head, to Vulcan so that we can essentially put him to rest in the Vulcan way. Now at that point, both he or Kirk have no idea that Spock's body is still alive and it's been reinvigorated by the Genesis planet. So as far as they're concerned, his body's dead. So why, after he got McCoy, did he go to the Genesis planet? He had no need to go there. He could have gone straight to Vulcan in the Enterprise. So for me, that's always been the massive plot hole in this film. Huge plot hole in this film. But, you know, if that had been the case, it would have been over very quick, I guess. So I do forgive it for that plot hole, but for me it just stands out massively. Interestingly, apparently Leonard Nimoy wanted Edward James Olmos to play the Klingon commander in this film. But he was outvoted, if you like, and they managed to they cast Christopher Lloyd because he was a little bit more Shakespearean in his approach, and he was a little bit more intimidating physically. So I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. It's a good watch. It's a good Star Trek film. There are some good moments in it, especially the moment where he blows up the Enterprise and that immortal line of "My God, what have I done?" And then Bones says, "What you had to do to death into a surviving." Turn death into a fighting chance to live, is what he says. Brilliant Star Trek lines. Very, very good. So I do enjoy Star Trek 3. It's not one I would put right near the top of my list, but it's certainly one I enjoy and don't have a huge amount of problems with. So yeah, that's my review of Star Trek 3. The Search for Spock. Coming next week will be one of the best Star Trek films ever made, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. So I hope you're enjoying these Star Trek reviews, everybody. I will see you back, obviously, with more content on Screen Stars very soon.